Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. I feel like, first off, I have to say, I feel like this lighting is really weird today. Like the sun's coming in and my camera's blocking it, but if you can bear with me, then we'll just trek on forward. No, but seriously, I really wanted to film this video this morning. I'm about to go get my hair done in a little bit, and I was downstairs eating breakfast with Dan, and I was like, I have to go film this video. I'm just really excited to film it, and I have to say, I was really surprised, if that's the right word. That's maybe like a little bit more dramatic than I mean, but we'll say surprised at the response to my last talking video, the last video I did where I just sat and talked with you guys. And I was really nervous to put that video up. I was really feeling like, just, are people gonna take it the wrong way? And honestly, the biggest thing was, I was like, am I even saying anything? Like, I was in the car editing that video with Dan because all of my talking videos, like my adoption videos with him, just talking videos in general, I like to have him listen to it as well. And when I got to the end of the video, I was like, did I even say anything? Like, what was the purpose of this video? And he was very much like, no, put it up, baby. Like, I think it's great. So I did it, and I was just really overwhelmed with your guys' support. And I loved reading your comments. Like, I just kept finding myself getting sucked into the comments and the thoughts that you guys had just in general around relating to the way that I feel. And I think that the way that you guys expressed feeling and what I was talking about in that video, I kind of think that a lot of people feel that way right now. So it was just really like, even though you think that, even though you're like, I think a lot of people feel like this, it's different than like putting it out there and then having people say, I feel like that. It's like, wow, other people do feel like that. But yeah, so today, we're gonna hop into today's video. I am talking about something totally different that I'm super excited to talk about, that a bunch of you guys have been asking me all over Instagram and Twitter and in the comments, because ever since I got into this topic, I will drop little comments saying like, oh yeah, that's so 7 of me, or like whatever. And people are like, what are you talking about? Or those of you that are into the Enneagram are like, oh my gosh, please talk about that. So I don't know how helpful or great this video will be. That's how I feel every time I am gonna sit down to talk over the years, but I'm just gonna talk. So the Enneagram, that is what we are talking about today. So I am someone that, because my parents were involved in certain businesses growing up, I have always been exposed to like personality tests. Even like at church, like churches will have, you know, tests on your gifts and stuff like that. So I've always been around and exposed to the concept of like, oh, the human brain has kind of patterns to it, and people can kind of generally fall into categories. And there's all these different tests that exist. I couldn't name them all. And of course, the only one I can think of right now off the top of my head, well, I was just talking actually in my Bible study last night to some of the girls. They were saying that I need to take a test called like Gifts Finder or something like that. Anyways, there's a bunch, you know, Myers-Briggs, the one that my parents were into growing up was Personality Plus, where they used, you know, the words sanguine, phlegmatic, melancholy, cholerics. They have like these 4 categories. There's the color one where people are like, are you red? Are you blue? Are you green? Are you yellow? And then what we're talking about today, the Enneagram. So I had heard people talk about the Enneagram a lot within the last like 2 years, and it ramped up even more in my move to Nashville. It's like a full-on Nashville thing, and actually it's becoming really popular in Christian circles now too. Like different pastors are actually starting to kind of preach sermons on it, not really on the Enneagram, but more like, there's this one church that I watch from time to time online called Sandals Church, based out of California, and that pastor did a sermon about each number on the Enneagram, and he would talk about different people in the Bible that he feels falls into that number. So I watched his one on the 7 because I'm a 7, and he was talking about how he believes that David in the Bible was a 7. And it's cool too because they also he does podcasts. So like they'll do a 4 podcast, and everybody on the panel in that podcast, they're all 4s. So you can kind of see like what the way that a group of 4s or a group of 3s or 7s, the way that their brain operates. And it's really funny to see the patterns of conversation, especially when you find your number, because watching a group of 7s talk, I'm just like, oh my gosh, right? So, okay, the Enneagram, like I said, personality test. The thing is, the Enneagram, to my knowledge, has been around, I want to say, for like hundreds of years. I could be wrong, but it's like an older type of test. And I am definitely not even kind of an expert. This is literally like just exposing the Enneagram to those of you that are like, the Ennea what? Like, or that are into the Enneagram and are interested to hear about my take and like my number and all of that. So there's so much to it though, and it goes so deep, and people have different theories on it and all of that. Also, I do have to say, I just want to put this out there. I believe in personality tests in the sense that I do think humans have patterns and things that we can kind of fall into. But I don't think that any, like, I don't know, they say about the Enneagram that like everybody has a little bit of each number. It's just you have a dominant number that tends to be like, whoa, that really resonates with me. And actually, they say that the one that you're the most like offended by, or like, oh my gosh, like that hits you in a really uncomfortable way, is typically the one that you are. It's the one that you're the most like, uncomfortable with. But yeah, I just wanted to put out there, I'm not one that thinks like, you are this to a T and like personality tests describe everyone perfectly. I just think it's a really interesting way to find, I don't know, find something that puts words to maybe things you've never put words before, which is how I felt when I read the Enneagram 7. And I am an ENFP in Myers-Briggs, and I kind of felt the same way, but for me personally, I have resonated so much more with the Enneagram. Now, people will say that they don't necessarily like the Enneagram because they feel like it's too negative. There's a bunch of different reasons. I kind of like the negative stuff in the Enneagram. To me, it feels like, if we're gonna call it sin, it feels like it takes my sin out of the shadows and kind of removes some of the shame around it, and almost kind of explains it to me like, oh, that's interesting, like that I'm kind of not hardwired, but we'll say that this way, so much so that someone is able to kind of call this out. And then I'm able to kind of recognize that more in myself and see things in myself that are like, oh, you're being a 7. Like sometimes it's like, that's so 7 of me. Sometimes it's like, that's so 7 of you, calm down. So yeah, so that's what the Enneagram is. There are 9 numbers on the Enneagram, and they're all very different, obviously. People will ask me how to take the test. I don't actually know. And to be honest, that's why a long time I didn't get into the Enneagram. I know there are books about the Enneagram, but some people don't want to like invest right away. They want to just like know what number they are before they invest. That's how I felt. But there are books like The Road Back to You, The Path Between Us. Those are some really popular Enneagram books. But there are podcasts. The way that I figured out I was a 7, I was too lazy. People would be like, go read all the numbers. And I was literally just like, I can't be bothered, whatever, I don't care that much. And then one day I was on Instagram, and a girl that I know that I've always been like, we're pretty similar. She kind of announced in her post, it was part of her post, that she is an ENFP on Myers-Briggs, and she's a 7 on the Enneagram. And I was like, I'm gonna go look up 7. And I went and I looked it up, and I was literally so shook. Like the things that they said about a 7 personality type, I mentioned this earlier, but there were things that they described a 7 as, which were using words that I never knew how to find. Like I never like said that. I was like, oh my gosh, that's totally me. And I've heard people say before that, oh, the Enneagram, it's the Barnum effect, which the Barnum effect is like this thing that basically like this test that people did at some point to basically prove, they were using like horoscopes, that people will fall for anything if it's general enough. I do not feel that way about the Enneagram, because while I do feel, there's different theories. Some people will say, oh, you're a number and you've got wings. So like I'm a 7 wing 8 or a 7 wing 6 or whatever. There's also different theories. So like at Sandals Church, they say, oh, you can have 3 numbers, and it's kind of like your most dominant to your least. And according to that, I'm a 7 6 4. But 7 is like, I resonate with it so much. But I mean, I don't know, man. I resonate a lot with elements of the 4 too, but like 7, it's creepy. It's not general. Not everyone could read every number and be like, I mean, you could be like, that's kind of me, because there's a little bit of every number in everyone, because humans are so diverse, obviously, and we all have our own individual traits. But I do not believe that the Enneagram is just, you know, the Barnum effect, because I think that each number is very distinct. Now, one thing I also like about the Enneagram is that they will offer you shades of health. And I thought that that was such a fascinating, like, look at a personality test, I guess you would call it, because they will rate, like, least healthy. And they actually do it in 9 as well. So there are 9 numbers on the Enneagram, but the shades of health are, like, 9 as well. So least healthy, like 9 to 6, and they'll describe it, the least healthy. And then let me open this. Before I read the shades of health, I'm going to pause, and I'm going to read you type 7, which is me, in a very, very brief description, okay? This will give you a little insight. 7s are extroverted, optimistic, versatile, and spontaneous. Playful, high-spirited, and practical. They can also misapply their talents, becoming overly extended, scattered, and undisciplined. Yikes. They constantly seek new and exciting experiences, but can become distracted and exhausted by staying on the go. They typically have problems with impatience and impulsiveness. At their best, they focus their talents on worthwhile goals, becoming appreciative, joyous, and satisfied. So let me scroll down though and get back to the shades of health, which is what I think is really fascinating. And it's like, when you go on these websites, so I'm on EnneagramInstitute.com, it's like long descriptions of each number and quotes from people and like an audio clip. So here's what it says: type 7 levels of development. So like unhealthy levels. At their worst, I'm going to jump up in sets of 3 rather than reading all 9. At their worst, their energy and health is completely spent. They become claustrophobic and panic-stricken, often give up on themselves and life. Deep depression and despair, self-destructive overdoses, impulsive suicide generally corresponds to the bipolar disorder and histrionic personality disorder. So that's like 9. We'll skip the next 2, going up to 6. So this is like a little more healthier, and that's a little more healthy in that second range. Get into conspicuous consumption and all forms of excess, self-centered, materialistic, and greedy, never feeling that they have enough, demanding and pushy, yet unsatisfied and jaded, addictive, hardened, and insensitive. And then level 3. So now this is that next one, and I'll read 3 and 1. Easily become accomplished achievers, generalists who do many different things well, multi-talented, practical, productive, usually prolific, cross-fertilizing areas of interest. And then level 1, at their best, assimilate experiences in depth, making them deeply grateful. This also made me laugh a lot. I was like, great, so me at my best is I'm deeply grateful. I'm grateful and appreciative for what they have. They become awed by the simple wonders of life, joyous and ecstatic, intimations of spiritual reality of the boundless goodness of life. Dan and I have laughed a lot about that, because some of the other numbers, it's like them at their best are like affecting world change in this like massive way, and a 7 at their best is like they're really grateful for what they have. So it made us, we've laughed a lot at that. So yeah, so that is something that I really find interesting and helpful about the Enneagram, is seeing those shades of health and like, okay, someone with my leaning, like what does that look like when they're really healthy and living their best life? It's cool too, because you can look up the kind of obvious things of like career paths for a certain number. I'm literally on the career path like that would be optimal for a 7, having the ability to kind of hop from interest to interest and dive into things when I want and then move on to the next thing. Like that's very 7. And things like, you know, relationships and how they engage with other numbers, which leads me to Dan's Enneagram. I want you to pause the video really quick if you know the Enneagram, and I want you to guess what you think based on what you've seen Dan's Enneagram number is in the comments. So pause it really quick, and then now that you've unpaused it, if you've unpaused it, I'm gonna tell you what Dan is. Dan is a 5 on the Enneagram. Now, I will say this, so the 5, oh, well, backing up also, there are titles. I don't know if I really like the titles for each number. Like 7s are typically known as the enthusiasts. There are different names in different circles, but like that's the typical one. 5s, which is what Dan is, I put quotes because the 5 in some ways is not as to a T for Dan as the 7 is for me. It's pretty dang close, and they will say things about the 5 that are eerily specific. I'll tell you that in a second. And they've said some things about a 5 and a 7 in a relationship that are eerily specific to our relationship. But his is not as like to the T as the 7 is description for me. So 5s are typically called the observer. I'm gonna go ahead and pull up that description. Okay, on this site, they're actually called the investigator. It says 5s are alert, insightful, and curious. They're able to concentrate and focus on developing complex ideas and skills. Independent, innovative, and inventive, they can also become preoccupied with their thoughts and imaginary constructs. They become detached, yet high-strung and intense. They typically have problems with eccentricity, nihilism, and isolation. At their best, they are visionary pioneers, often ahead of their time and able to see the world in an entirely new way. So, here's the thing that I'm also not fully understanding yet about the Enneagram, but I guess everyone is kind of in, it's like lumps. So it's, if I remember this right, it's like, wait, 2, 3, 4. So it's weird. It's like their head types, their body types, and something else. And whatever those categories are, Dan and I are actually in the same lump. Like it's 5, 6, 7. Those people are all in the same lump of being called like head types, which is actually, according to this website, it was so interesting to read. That is something that makes, well, and also Dan and I think share a 6. Like we think Dan is a 5, 6. I don't know what his third number would be, and I think I'm a 7, 6, but they say when you read about a 5 and a 7 in a relationship that it's our interest in so many different things and in like just intellectual stuff, I don't really know, that bonds us and allows us to kind of like have these deep, fascinating conversations, which is totally just something that I've noticed and experienced with Dan over the years. Like the conversations that he'll have with me about all kinds of things, the way things work, politics, religion, just all these things, they're very intellectually stimulating and we'll go really like all over and deep with it. The other thing is, they said, it's fascinating when you read about 7s, and this is one of those things that I mentioned that I have known and never put words to. I never thought about it. I never realized it. And then they said it and I was like, whoa, that's weird. I wasn't searching 7 and 5s in a relationship. I was just reading about 7s. And in each number that you read on, they will talk about how each number can like glean something from another number and it would be beneficial to them. And when I first started dating Dan, I remember noticing that there was something, and I couldn't quite pin it, but there was something about the way that I felt around him that I had never felt around anyone else, that was just very peaceful and like accepted, and it was just slower. And I mean, on a side note, I felt like I came from such a performance background and I was like, I don't ever feel like I have to perform around him. Like we're just chilling. Anyways, they specifically said in the description about a 7 that if they can glean certain things from a 5, they will become healthier. And specifically, one of those things was the ability to slow down and dive deeper into topics that interest them, because 5s will tend to just stay in a topic like longer than a 7, whereas like 7s, like they were joking about this at my Bible study last night. They're like, I made some kind of comment because the other day I filmed 3 cooking videos, and I had a 4.5-hour World War II documentary on, and I was telling them that, and they all just started laughing, and they're like, of course you had a 4.5-hour World War II documentary on. They're like, you're always like watching the weirdest things and learning all these different things. And I'm just laughing because I'm like, yes, but the way they describe 7s is perfect. Like, I really am not that smart at any one thing. Like I will dive into something, like that whole saying, jack of all trades, master of none. That's me. Like, and it's a little embarrassing, but I said that to Dan the other day and he was like, who cares? You don't have to be a master at anything. Like, why is that what's so valued? He's like, you have your own things that you bring to the world. So I appreciated that perspective from Dan. But yeah, it's interesting though. So in the 5 description, one thing, like I said, it's not all Dan to a T. Actually, Dan's dad, I am confident with every bone in my body, is a 5. And he, from what I know of him, is a 5 to a T. But there are certain things they'll say sometimes that I'm like, that's not you. Like one of the descriptions of a 5 is that they'll be in a room and then after everybody's done hanging out, they'll be like, oh, you were here. I forgot you were here. I get what they're saying because sometimes Dan will be more quiet, but as a generalization, that's not Dan. Like Dan is very comfortable and likes making jokes and just like, I don't know, he actually kind of likes saying shocking things and causing people to be like, oh, like he likes that. So that's not him, but that is his dad. But so many other things. For example, I was on a walk with Dan maybe like a month ago, and we're on the walk and he like looks up and he's like, do you ever imagine what it would be like to fly? And I'm like just like flying, like I guess. And he's like, no, like a bird, like the way birds fly. And I was like, I've never imagined that I am a bird. He's like, I'd love to be a bird for one day. I was like, all right, never thought. He's like, you've never thought of that? I was like, never thought that I would want to be a bird for a day. And somewhere around that same time, or maybe it's just in general, I don't know, I've been with him a long time, we've had conversations about things being really tiny too, and about how like, you know, like, how do I word this? Huge things being really small, like cells and DNA, and how complex things can be even when they're really tiny. And he's very fascinated by that, way more than me, because he's into the science. Like I'm fascinated by like the thought, the like philosophy of it, if that's the word. He's fascinated by the actual science of it. And when I was reading a 5 description, they literally said, 5s like to imagine that they are a bird flying high in the sky, not only because they want to see how things work, observe things, experience this different thing, but also because 5s are not so like socially inclined. They can be a little more detached emotionally and have a hard time necessarily like embracing their emotions. So it's a way to like observe. But then they said, or they like to imagine that they are tiny and on a cellular microscopic level. And they were like, both are detached from people and both are very like science driven, like investigatory observer type thing. And I was literally like, I got chills. I was like, Dan and I were literally just talking about this. I was like, that's so weird. So it's very strange. And that's how I felt many times when reading the Enneagram. Now 5s and 7s in a relationship, just like every other relationship on the planet, there are things that are just so awesome about our relationship, things that are very unique that we've talked about before. I'm like, dude, if you ever died and I got remarried, or vice versa, whatever, I'm like, I'm sure I could fall in love again. I mean, I really am of the camp of like, love is a choice. I don't necessarily believe in soulmates. I think that there are so many people that you can choose to create a life with and fall in love with, but there would never be that relationship again. Like, it's so special and unique what we have between us. And that's like every relationship. What you have and develop together, like, is obviously so unique and special. Wait, what was I saying? Oh, but point being, there are things about being a 7, being married to a 5, that have been hard, that we've had to work through. And obviously hard for him being married to a 7. Like, it's, I'm laughing because thinking about all the things he makes fun of me of. And now he just will go like, oh, my 7. Like, I'm pretty emotional in general. You know, I don't like negative emotions. It's hard for me to process negative emotions on a side note, but I'm pretty like emotional. I'm pretty, the way that we have conversations can be different because 7s, I was just listening to a podcast about this the other day. 7s can be more fluid in their conversation, and 5s tend to be more like they're on the topic. It's not so much about the relational conversation that's happening back and forth. It's more about what they're talking about. And, you know, I don't even know where I'm going with this. I guess like this is just me like free talking that, you know, every relationship has its difficult points, but finding out our numbers has been another level of like, just adding to our growth and closeness and development of our relationship together, because we've learned more about, oh, not even like, it's not even like, I never knew that about myself. It's like, oh wow, there are words to that now. So now we can talk about that because we didn't even put words to that before. We couldn't even really put our finger on it. So it's just been really fascinating. So it is time for me to wrap this video up because I gotta go to my hair appointment. But two things. One, if you want me to do another video on the Enneagram, please leave me a comment down below and let me know like what you'd like me to talk about next, if anything. I hope this wasn't annoying because I feel like I didn't give that much information, but I don't know. I'm always gonna feel paranoid in all videos in general, but especially talking videos. Like, did I say anything? So yeah, so let me know in the comments what you'd like to see, if anything. And also, if you know what you are in the Enneagram, let me know what your number is, or if you know like your wings, or if you do the whole like 3-number thing, like how I'm pretty sure I'm a 764, maybe a 746, not sure. My dad, by the way, we figured out is a 4-7, which on a side note was fascinating because I've always related so much with my dad, but then there's always been these like little differences I've never been able to pin. I'm like, God, we're so similar, but like we're not. And then when I read the Enneagram aloud, I read multiple numbers to my parents when they were in town last time. We sat on the porch. It was actually really beautiful. It was like a summer night. The bugs are all buzzing outside of the screened-in patio. We had our little fire on, and I just sat there on my iPad and I read the different numbers to everybody while they just listened to me read. It was really cute. And we figured out, oh my gosh, my dad's a 4. And I was like, that is totally where, like, it made all of our differences clearer to me. But he has 7 in him too, which is why there are things that we relate on, and I have 4 in me too. Anyways, wow, this is all over the map. So let me know what your number is if you know it on the Enneagram. Let me know if you want to see me do another Enneagram video. And yeah, good luck figuring it out if that's something that you're interested in. I think it's been like an awesome little tool in addition to my life, and I'm fascinated by it. So yeah, I appreciate you guys so much. I don't even know where I'm going with this. I'll see you back here soon, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Okay, bye guys.